From Journey with VRD, you're listening to the Visions, Missions, and Manifestations podcast, the number one place for spirituality, healing, and transcendence. I'm your host, Vivian-Raquel Dayan. Now let's get into it. When I think of the freedom I want to cultivate in my life, the first person who comes to mind is Isabella Beham. This woman has accomplished remarkable things, manifesting not only her dream career, which is so aligned with her purpose, but she also manifested her husband and family, which, if I may add, she did all on her own terms. Her voice is so strong and her mission is so liberating. Isabella changes the narrative around dating, love, and partnership. What makes her really stand out as a strong female figure is that instead of settling for the wealthy man who would have given her a great life, she tapped into her mission and her intuition. She said no and ultimately manifested a partner who provides the space for her to have it all: romance, career, and the freedom to evolve as a human being. Welcome, Isabella. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your journey of becoming a matchmaker and a soulmate guide.
Yeah, so when I was in college, I guess it goes back that far, I really am someone who struggles to do things that I'm not interested in. I cannot sit through a class that I don't care about. I can be a great student, but only if I care. You know, I'm one of those people, and I like, that's not a good quality. I'm not here to be like, yes, like I'm lazy as fuck. You know, I am, but I am if I don't care. I really truly am so unmotivated. So I was like, the only way I'm going to be able to get through college is if I study something that I find interesting. I was an English major at first, and I really thought it was boring. So I transferred over to religious studies. I had a mentor come into my life in the religious studies realm. She was the director of Jewish studies at my university. And she was like, I just, one day was just telling her, God, I'm just so bored. I find this all so boring. And she said, well, why don't I give you a scholarship to spend the summer in Israel? And you can figure out what you want to do after that. And I studied biblical archaeology while I was there, classic. It's not actually the class I signed up for, but the class I signed up for was canceled. So they just like reverted me to that. And it was awesome. I found it so stimulating and just fascinating. And I was having like such intense flashbacks. Being in Israel, I would like get lost in random parts of town and just like, this was like pre-Google Maps people, like I don't even think I had an iPhone, honestly. I might have. And I would just like find my way back to where I was supposed to be. So I studied religious studies, and then I spent some time in Eastern Europe, and I was really interested in that. I started doing research at some point in Eastern Europe. I spent a month in Poland doing research, and I wanted to study nationalism studies. I don't know why, but I got my master's in nationalism studies. I was living in Budapest. I had gotten my master's degree at Central European University in Budapest, and I got a job offer in New York. My friend was working with an organization there, and she was leaving, and she recommended me for the position. They called me one day and said, hey, when can you come to New York to take the writing test and to meet the executive director so we can extend you an official offer? And it was like a moment, I swear to God, like where time stopped. I swear time stopped. My best friend at the time was sitting in front of me, and she had decided she wasn't going to go back to the US. She was going to stay in Europe. And she had like these big eyes looking at me, just like so anxious. And I just felt the timelines diverge. And I don't know why, but I just said, I'm sorry, I'm not coming. I'm not accepting the offer. I'm staying here. And I followed by calling my dad, and I said, look, it was a nonprofit job. They offered me $50,000 a year, which is a pretty good salary, like straight out of school. I literally had just defended my thesis, but I crunched the numbers, in New York, and I was like, okay, this is how much I'm going to be paying in taxes. This is how much I'm going to be paying in rent. And I called my dad, and I was like, I don't think it's worth it. Like, I think that every month I'm going to be calling you asking to borrow money. I think I'm going to have to live with like 4 roommates, or I'm going to just, I'm just going to be like always tight. And that's not how I want to live. Like, I don't want to always be I don't want to be on the subway commuting to work. I don't want to be stressed about money. I don't want to live somewhere that doesn't light me up. Like, I love New York, but after 3 days in New York, my nervous system is not happy. So, that's just how I felt. And he was like, that makes sense logically to me. I found a sick apartment in Budapest. I did have roommates, but my rent was $400 a month, all included. With like literally the best views. I posted a picture of it on my Instagram the other day because I literally had the best views in the entire city from this apartment. And I was living alone prior to that. My rent was 350 euros a month, which was around like $400 still living alone. So that's what I did. Like, I had some money saved. Someone had gifted me a Rolex, a vintage Rolex. So I sold that to like, buy me some time, figure out what the fuck I was going to do with my life. I started a business doing freelance writing, and considering that my rent was $400 a month, I made enough money to support myself and like be able to go out, to travel around Europe every once in a while. So it was a better, I was making significantly less money than I would have been in New York. And I didn't have the prestigious job at like the NGO or whatever, but I was living such a better quality of life. And I feel like I really just bought myself a year to be able to figure out what I really wanted to do. And right around that time, the year was coming to an end. I went through a really bad breakup, and it was like, just, it wasn't like a mean breakup. Like, we have no like bad blood with each other. Like, it was just a really hard karmic breakup. And that was a really crazy spiritual experience. I ended up coming back to the US the day after we broke up. My nervous system was just completely destroyed by the breakup. I didn't know what was happening at the time, but I think what was happening were like timelines were just collapsing around me, and I was in timeline limbo. And it was really unnerving. And I came back to the US. I was a mess. My dad basically gave me a blank check and was like, go to my hypnotherapist and get your shit together. So my hypnotherapist, Sarah Riley, is, she's in Orlando, and she is just like, one of the most spiritual women you'll ever meet. She's a shaman, big into like the starseed thing. So she kind of helped me understand from a spiritual perspective what was happening. And I did an intense, I was intensely working through my trauma and my past life trauma as well. And in that period, I was up at like 3 a.m. I had really bad insomnia after the breakup. And I saw a posting in a job board for a matchmaking job. And I had always loved The Millionaire Matchmaker. As a teen, I used to go home after school and watch it with my best friend. And I was like, that's so funny. I'm just going to apply and see what happens. Like, maybe this isn't even a real job posting. So I applied, and I applied at like around 3:30 a.m. and they got back to me at 7 a.m. inviting me for a job interview. And then they hired me 6 days later.
I wonder what was on your resume that you applied with to be a matchmaker.
Oh, it's funny, I'm glad you asked that, because I forgot that actually about 2 months before this, because remember, I was working as a freelance writer. So I was just like picking up all these kind of like odd jobs, really. I'd seen a job posting for a dating blog, writing blog posts for them. And the pay was terrible. It was $20 for one blog post of 800 words, which was like way below the rate that I had worked up to as a freelance writer. And I was working for like some really cool companies. Like, around this time, I also got a job offer to be the editor for a super major website that everyone listening, I'm sure, has heard of. But I said no, because the owner and the director was a narcissist, and I just wasn't willing to go back to that dynamic. It was like I sometimes kick myself for just not like sucking it up and doing it. But like, I really, truly, my nervous system couldn't handle being around any more narcissists. But I digress. So I had taken this job writing for a dating blog, and I remember pausing and being like, should I do this? Like, it's such shitty pay. But then just a voice in my head said, yes, do it. It's going to lead to something else. So I did it anyway, even though some people might say like, oh, that was like so low self-worth of you to accept a job that was so badly paid. And it's like, I just felt that it was going to lead to something. So I think that's what stood out on my resume for this matchmaking job was like, you know, it wasn't that much experience, but I had experience in the dating industry already.
Makes sense completely. I love how this kind of found you in your early journey to becoming who you are today. But also it sounds like you had to navigate relationships of your own that didn't feel right and that you had to move past in order to get here. So what ended up happening after the hypnotherapist?
Yeah, so I went back to Budapest where I was living, and God, I had like the fucking sickest apartment at this point. Like I had moved out from living with my roommates because it was a toxic environment. Like I really liked them I really loved them as people, honestly. But they were both struggling with severe depression. And when I lived with them, I thought I had severe depression. And then I left. I went out of town. I went to London to see my family for a week. And I was like, I don't have depression. I had like, none of these thoughts are mine. I'm absorbing what's around me. And they were really struggling so severely to the point of, piling up dishes for months in their rooms, like not bathing. Like it was like really severe depression. And I felt for them, but it had gotten to the point where, because they were so non-functional, and because truly they had more responsibilities than I had, because I was a freelancer. That didn't mean I wasn't working, but from their perspective, it seemed like I was free all the time to do all of the burdens that they couldn't carry. Because one was a PhD student, one had a proper job in the city. And that meant that I was doing pretty much all of the cleaning in the house. I was doing all of the cooking, and I do enjoy cooking, but it really started to feel, I remember on Thanksgiving, it felt like I was like a put upon housewife. And they were, I don't know, like they were just my like ungrateful husband with mental health issues. So I had moved into my own apartment, but when I got back, it just felt like it wasn't going to be permanent anymore. And I started dating as soon as I got back, I think trying to ground myself into the location. And my toxic dynamics and love, like they just reappeared. They were way better. They were way less dramatic, I guess, than previous, but I wasn't happy in the dating realm. And I realized I needed to do deeper work on that and on myself. And then, I had already started working as a matchmaker, and I was struggling with it because it felt incomplete. The work felt incomplete to me. Like sitting and setting people up on dates wasn't filling me up. And I felt like I needed, like there was just something missing. Like I needed more than what I was doing. So I, by happenstance reconnected with a theta healer that I knew from back in Orlando. And she was like, I'm doing a theta healing training for, to get your theta healing certification in October. So I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like, this isn't working for me anymore. I love Budapest, but I feel so disjointed here. I feel ungrounded. I haven't worked through my shit enough. This is I would say this was pre self-help revolution. So it wasn't so easy to just like hire a coach, or like work with the right therapist online, whatever it might be. I felt like I needed to be on the ground physically with people that I knew and that I wanted to work with. So I just moved back to the US. I got my theta healing training and continued doing my intense inner work, which included a lot of stuff, like, a lot of stuff on the ground in Orlando at the time. The Beautiful Chorus were the band, The Beautiful Chorus. I don't know if I think most people have probably heard them on TikTok or Instagram, but at the time they were based in Orlando, and they co-owned the studio with my theta healer that my theta healer was teaching courses out of. So I would go every Sunday. They had kind of almost like a version of like church, but like Reiki church, where they would perform and do Reiki, like hands-on Reiki for everyone who was there for like $20. So I was there every single Sunday, getting Reiki, listening to the Beautiful Chorus. I was taking follow-up classes for theta healing training, going to my yoga studio that I'd been going to since I was 16. I just really needed that. I needed something physical on the ground that felt like at home and grounded.
Mm. And theta healing is a big part of what you do now. So it's really, I feel like throughout your journey, even though there's been some rougher patches, you had a very strong intuition, a strong connection with your intuition too. It sounds like no matter what you feared people would think of you as, you still were able to take action on your intuition and what felt right for you, which is a quality that, you know, I feel I had as a younger girl, as a child. But for me, moving through life, you know, the judgments got to me at some points, and I had to work through like realigning with my intuition and my strength. Did you ever have any of those moments on your journey, or no matter what, were you able to stay true to you?
No, I mean, when I first started having my spiritual awakening, when I was, so I grew up very spiritual in a sense. Like my parents were kind of like when we think of like the new age people of like the early 2000s, like, you know, Abraham Hicks and all of that, like my parents were really all about that. And my mother is also Brazilian. So like I grew and was raised in, my mother was raised in, my mother is ethnically Jewish, but she was raised in traditional Brazilian spirituality. So she was spiritual on a different level, you know, like I was raised going to like get cleansings in Brazil and like going to meet spiritual saints in Brazil and stuff like that, getting healings, all of that kind of thing. So even though I was raised very spiritual, there was somehow like a deep fear around it. And when I started having my spiritual awakening when I was in college, it was really bad timing. I was just going through a major trauma. I wasn't ready for it. And I thought I was crazy too. Like even though I had been exposed to so much spirituality, for some reason, it didn't connect to me what was happening. And I went to the psychiatrist and I was like, I'm crazy. And he was like, okay, yeah, sure. Like here's some pills. And it shut down my spiritual awakening, which was okay, I think, because I don't think I was ready for my spiritual awakening and I didn't have anyone to help me with it. So when I moved to Europe, he kept the pills weren't really working because I didn't actually have mental illness. And like if you try to medicate yourself for mental illness and you don't have it, like it's not going to work long term. So he just kept increasing my doses and he put me on pretty high doses of a few different things. And by the time I moved to Europe for graduate school, I had no personality. So at some point midwinter, my year that I was getting my master's degree, I was like, fuck this. Cut everything out cold turkey, which is actually very dangerous. Like you can have a seizure and die. And I lived alone. So like by the grace of who knows, like I didn't have like any major withdrawal symptoms. But I for some reason just like felt called to get back into my spirituality. And I started working with plant medicines in this time period. And on one journey, I saw this vision of like myself on a stage and I was performing, you know, and no one was watching. And to me, that really hit home that like we are all living in such a way as to like perform for other people that we think are watching and judging and observing us. And the truth is everyone is so obsessed with their own story and obsessed with their own performance that no one is watching you. So I just realized that I couldn't live my life anymore as a performance.
Wow, how deep.
Yeah.
And in the culture of social media where we're like constantly posting our life or what's happening to us, did you yet share your truth, your authenticity, the things that you were interested in to the public at this point?
No, and I really kicked myself for that because I wasn't on social media at all until 2019. So I had like a Facebook account at some point in high school and then deleted it. Like through college, I didn't have any kind of social media. And part of that is because I had broken up with an abusive narcissist and I didn't want him to be able to observe, to observe what I was doing. So it wasn't until 2019 that I started sharing after I finished my theta healing training.
Hey there, I'm briefly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready, on a manifestation journey that will help you get there now. We're calling 8 women who are ready to accelerate their manifestation process, deepen their spiritual practices, and come back to their everyday life feeling rejuvenated, powerful, and already living the life that they came wanting to manifest. If this sounds like you, join us on the Journey with VRD Sedona, Arizona retreat from May 16th to the 20th. Together with guides, healers, and leaders, you'll learn to manifest the finances, career, health, whatever it is that you want to manifest. Plus, we're gifting you $100 off the retreat when you sign up by February 29th. Use code JVRD retreat, all caps, when checking out. Be sure to sign up now as space is limited. There are only a few spots left. And to sign up, learn more, visit www.journeywithvrd.com/event-Sedona retreat. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Now, back to the episode. What I'm interested in hearing is a little bit more about your awakening in college that you felt originally you had to suppress. What were some of the symptoms? What do you think triggered it? Because I also think it's so cool how there was this communication between you and the awakening. If we were to say it had as its own consciousness, on the one hand, it was like, you're ready. And on the other hand, you were like, no, I'm not. So it was this moment of needing to gain the strength to believe in yourself and your capabilities and step into your power. So there's an interesting play there in communication.
So, I mean, I think there's a few reasons. So, well, first of all, like, I just really want to say, like, just because you're being pressured to do something in the spiritual realm doesn't mean you have to. Most of our spirit guides, I mean, a lot of our spirit guides, I should say, not all of them. And it also really depends on your own like journey through life on this planet or other planets. Not all of them are going to be beings that have ever been human before, or that have perhaps been human so long ago that they like are, you know, it was a completely different reality. So when they are asking you to do something, or when you're like, hey, I need to manifest money right now because I have bills to pay and like blah, blah, blah. Like they don't necessarily comprehend what it feels like from our nervous systems to not want to do something or to be asking for something. And they also don't necessarily understand time. So if you're like, I need to manifest $10,000 by April 15th because I have to pay the fucking IRS, like they don't know what that means, you know? So that kind of shifts how you have to communicate with your guides and ask for your needs to be met. But when my awakening was triggered because I think plant medicine use, but also, like I say, like I was always in the spirit realm, you know, I was always like, you know, always taking classes and everything, but it was just a completely different thing when the spiritual awakening happens. I had always had a really bad relationship with my mother, and we went to the Hay House I Can Do It conference in September of my senior year of college. And while we were there, I don't know like what someone there's like fucking spirit guides or higher self or what must have triggered her so hard because she started acting literally psychotic. Like she was acting fully demonically possessed. I think it was Brian Weiss, because this started when we were with Brian Weiss doing his past life regression, and I couldn't get into the past life regression because my mom was being so crazy, and it just like kept escalating through the day. She was like intentionally triggering me, intentionally saying things that she knew would trigger me, and finally just snapped at her. And she lost it, went ballistic, started screaming, was being so abusive. And I just was so triggered. And I started crying and crying. And I don't know where she went. I stayed at the conference. I went to is his name Kyle Gray, like the angel guy who does like the angel oracle cards?
I don't know Kyle Gray, but I am the #1 fan of Brian Weiss. Like you said his name, my whole body lit up. But continue.
He was like one of the first spiritual books that I ever read when I was probably like 13.
13. I'm just like so amazed.
Well, my parents raised me that way. You know, I read Autobiography of a Yogi when I was 11. I read The Mists of Avalon when I was 11 because my parents were like buying me this stuff and encouraging that. But it's still, just because they were encouraging the knowledge, I wasn't prepared for the embodiment of what was going to happen when a spiritual awakening happened. So I went to Kyle Gray, I think that's his name. He's like the angel oracle card guy. And he said in his talk, no angel is ever going to encourage you to stay in an abusive relationship. If someone isn't treating you right, it doesn't matter if they're your mother, it doesn't matter if they need you, it doesn't matter what they're going through. You're never supposed to stay in an abusive relationship. And I think he just triggered my, I think maybe that experience of being at that conference just triggered my spiritual awakening too fast. And then combined with the trauma of finally going fully no contact with my mother, like, and also I was working 2 jobs in college. Like I had 2 real jobs. I was working as a research assistant for a textbook and I was working at a nonprofit. So I was just going to classes in between working, and I had a full class load. I was writing 2 thesis projects. I was applying to graduate school. Like it was all just too much. And it was too much for my nervous system. And that's why I was just like, I can't do this. And I didn't have the tools, and I didn't have like support to help me through that process, because I think those of us who went through a spiritual awakening in between like 2012 and 2020, it hit us way harder than like the people who went through their spiritual awakening in like, I don't know, 1995.
I have a question. I would love to get your opinion on this. So I teach method 5 dimensions to ascension. And I always say that when you're going through one of those dimensions of your awakening, of your ascension, sometimes we accidentally or on purpose open a portal that takes us to a higher plane or a higher vibrational or a quicker vibrational plane. And so I wonder what you think about that, on purpose or by accident, because it seems like because you were given all of these resources at a young age to expand and to grow, you quote unquote accidentally hit a portal to your awakening, and you were able to communicate really well, like, I'm not ready for this. But at the same time, in that phase of being not ready, you definitely stepped into being ready.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because that was just a messy experience. I didn't have like the tools to get me through to the other side. But in 2020, like most of us, I went through probably second or third spiritual awakening. And it's exactly what you described is exactly how I described it, because it accidentally put me onto an even higher timeline than I was supposed to be on. So the timeline I was on, I was supposed to end up marrying this person, and they became under the influence of an entity. And instead of me being like, as many people did in 2020, like shit was fucked up. Instead of me being like, oh my God, I'm going to save him. Oh my God, I'm going to stay here. Oh my God, I'm going to teach him. I'm going to help him. I was just like, fuck this. I don't want to do this. And I think that, and I did the healing to resolve the karma that was attaching us to each other. I did tons of past life work. I did tons of energy healing. I did tons of like attachment stuff. And I was just like, I'm not getting stuck in this. And then I moved to another country to separate myself even further. And I really think that's what propelled me onto like the soulmate timeline of being able to actually manifest my soulmate in this lifetime, because I don't think I was initially going to or aligned with that.
There takes a sense of awareness in order to see that. So how did you step into your purpose, which is matching people and helping people, kind of remove the gunk and the stories and the attachments to their past to be able to manifest and step in their timeline of manifesting their soulmate?
I mean, I think it was just my own personal journey. So I think it was really just my own life initiating me. But it was also like every time I tried to leave the matchmaking industry, which I tried many times to leave the matchmaking industry. It is a very challenging industry. I've been matchmaking full time, oh my God, for 6 years now. And that's really rare to find a matchmaker who's worked in the industry that long, because it has very high turnover rates. People don't like to stay in the industry, and it's totally understandable. Every time I tried to leave, I couldn't, like I just kept getting pulled back into it. And I think that was, like my higher self pulling me back to my purpose. And then, in 2021, I was in Brazil. And I just felt like it's time for me to have my partner. I think I was like 27 or 28. I don't really remember. And I was just like, it's time. And I started manifesting that, but it's not as easy as like, in our current reality, I should say, it's not as easy as just saying, oh, I want a partner. And then, like someone shows up the next day. It's like a whole fucking spiritual journey and initiation. I went through many, many initiations. I was visited by 3 different divine feminine deities in this time. I started downloading information about soulmates. I went through a deep healing of my past going to Catholic school, which I think really fucked me up. So I had to shed a lot of that programming. I was exposed to Christian Gnosticism, which was really liberating for me. And yeah, I mean, it was just like an intense initiation period. At times I would go weeks without leaving my apartment because I was just receiving downloads and like working through stuff and like having shit come up to process. And I was in a very vulnerable state of not wanting to be around people because I don't know, like I think I was switching timelines or something, but my aura was very sensitive at this time. And I mean, the story of, like almost getting back with an ex during this time period, but I stayed the course and met my partner. And as soon as we met, it was a huge activation spiritually. It took my psychic gifts to another level. I started downloading tons and tons and tons and tons of information, which I think we met in April. In June, I told him I was going to make a course. And then in December, we released Soulmate Alchemy, which was my first course. It was all about soulmates. It was all of the information that I had downloaded about soulmates. It was about how to manifest a soulmate. And that was a $40,000 launch. So I felt like, and it was the first product I had ever launched. So it was really aligned. And I felt like I could combine the spiritual world with my knowledge as a matchmaker. And obviously, like the world is hungry for a deeper kind of love than we've been shown.
I come from a community, or I grew up in a community where, being with the guy who has the money is so important because that means you'll never have to worry about anything in life. And growing up the way I did, I witnessed a lot of the dark side of that, women having to be like subservient to their husbands and not really having a say, even though from the outside it might like look so great, the big house, the shopping, the vacations, but so much happens behind closed doors. And I think it's really important for people to see that, especially women, to see that, money is something that comes when you're in your purpose in a way. It's not something that you have to get from somebody else, whether it be a parent figure or a relationship. And it really hit a string for me when I heard that you kind of experienced this moment, this crossroads in your life, or like you could have been with this person who would have financially supported you and you would have had a really good life. But even so, you stuck with your intuition and your guides really telling you, hey, Isabella, like there's something so beautiful on the other side of you listening to us and you listening to what lights you up in life.
It was hard to do. And I had in the past always had a certain financial amount on my, manifestation list for a partner. And I realized at some point that was coming from a place of, I don't believe I can make this money myself. So I had to get rid of that and I had to make that money myself before before I could be open to meeting my person, I think. And so I met my husband in April, and in December, I was back home in Orlando. And I also want to say, people who went through their spiritual awakening in Florida, like, I feel for you, because that shit's fucked up. Like, there's so many open portals there. Florida is a fucked up place. I mean, I love it, but it's like very energetically intense. So I was back in Florida, and Florida is always where like the weirdest spiritual initiations happen for me. So I just had an intuition to use Bumble while I was there. And I always used Bumble Premium so that I didn't have to swipe. If you're someone who doesn't like swiping, just do Bumble Premium and you can just see who's already liked you and then decide what you want to do from there. So I had used Bumble Premium, and I saw a guy swipe right on me, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I swiped right on him. And then when I was going through my list of people I'd matched with to message them, I looked at his profile more closely, and I was like, oh my God, this is my ex. Because we had dated 10 years before that, when I was 19 and he was 25. I was in my Lana Del Rey era. This is Born to Die, 2012. And he was a heavy user of drugs, and he had cleaned up, so he looked completely different. And we obviously didn't have a healthy relationship. Like, I was a freshman in college and he was 25. And yeah, it was just weird. It was weird to see him. And, you know, I messaged him because my initial response was unmatch and ignore, which I'm an avoidant person. Like, so that's just my go-to response. And in this period of time, I was really challenging myself to act against my patterns, I guess. So if I previously was avoidant, that means I have to face it. So I messaged him, and he was like, I'm still in love with you. I should have never let you go. And I was like, I was 19, like, creepy, but okay. And he was like, can we meet up and talk? So we spent New Year's Eve together, and he basically was, I mean, he's super loaded, like owns airplanes, loaded, and really got his life turned around from when he was just like a junkie bass player in a ska band, when I knew him. And he was like, if you leave Mexico, at the time I was living in Mexico, and come back, you know, we can be together. I will take care of you. Like, you know, his feelings were genuine, and it was also seductive because of the nostalgia element of someone who's known me for 10 years. This is someone who knew me and liked me when I was like my most destructive, fucked up self. And, but I just felt like I could see the timelines in that moment. And I felt like I could see the timeline where we were together and where all these things would happen, you know, like getting married, having kids, blah, blah, blah. And I would always have this nagging feeling of, what if there's something else? And I was willing to forego the safety to find out if there was something else. I didn't think it was fair to him either for me to be in a relationship with him if I was always going to be wondering about what I had given up to be with him.
Wow. How long later, after leaving this opportunity or this, you know, door, did you meet your now husband?
So I went back to Mexico, and I just shut down my life. Like, I really was just going into spiritual stuff. And I cried for 10 days straight when I got back to Mexico. Like, it wasn't easy to walk away. Like, there were attachments there. And you know, we had known each other for 10 years, and I cried for 10 full days, and I was devastated. And I think that really needed to happen for me to meet my husband, because I hadn't thought about this person in like 10 years. Like, we broke up and I shoved it down and never thought about it again. So I think it needed to come out. So this was the beginning of January. This was January 1st. And I met my husband towards the end of April.
Wow.
Not even 5 months.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
One thing that I ask everybody on the podcast is what you think is your strongest sixth sense or your superpower, and how has it helped you manifest and become the person you are today?
I think that I have the ability to see timelines. So for me, before I make a decision, I can go in and see, like, I can't see everything, of course, but I can get a sense of what the different timelines look like. Like, as I just said, I went in and looked. I didn't like what I saw. Like, it wasn't terrible, but there was always a nagging feeling of there being something I missed out on.
And working with clients, are you able to kind of tap into their timelines when they approach you with a choice they need help making or guidance making?
Yeah, I can. And, when I'm working with clients, something I can do for them that I wasn't always able to do for myself is I can always, like, see when I'm talking to someone what is actually, I don't love the word blocking, but like what is actually preventing them from connecting with their soulmate or divine partner, or like, person they're destined to be with.
It's so beautiful, and how genuine and authentic and how connected you are to yourself. Like, I wanted to say to your gifts and all of that, but it's just an accumulation of who you are. So when you met your now husband, your soulmate, were you able to, or was there a moment where you stepped back and kind of looked at the timeline with him to see, all right, is this actually the one?
I actually didn't, and I could have never predicted what was to come. But I did, a lot of people, they meet their partner and they're like, it's just, they're dating, and then at some point they go into a relationship, and then at some point they fall in love. But I think we both knew pretty much instantly that we were going to be together. And like, literally on our first date, we were on the roof of my apartment and someone started setting off fireworks. Like, shit like that was just like constantly happening when we were together. So it was an instant, this is it, I think, for both of us. And we moved fast. We moved in together really fast, and I ended up getting pregnant. We met in April and I got pregnant in August. I didn't know I was pregnant until October, but I got pregnant in August. And that's like a caveat I always tell people if they want to communicate with their spirit babies is like, I communicated with my spirit baby before I met my husband, and I told her, I want to meet my partner, like, help me connect with your father, blah, blah, blah. And the problem is, if you do that, they're going to think that's an invitation to come in as soon as you eat. So that's just, like, be careful if you're using that method of love manifestation.
It's funny you say that, because I've definitely connected with my spirit babies, my soul babies in the past. But last night, right before I went to sleep, I actually can't sleep without an eye mask. I'm very light sensitive. And I felt my baby. Like, I felt it so strongly that my hand was literally so heavy, as if I was holding the baby. And it was the most surreal experience. It just hit me. And, watching my great grandmother with her, or him. And it was definitely a beautiful experience. And I was thinking after the experience how it definitely can't be coming now because I'm not with anybody. So, but it got me excited.
Powerful method if you ask them to help you find their father. But they come with entitlement if they help you,
I definitely hear that. Talk to me a little bit, if you don't mind, about your journey with spirit guides. I know there was a moment where during your awakening, you thought you were crazy and you went to your therapist and you got the medication. But what was the moment like when you realized, no, this is like, how'd you differentiate a crazy voice in your head versus a spirit guide or an entity?
Yeah. So I thankfully I never had crazy voices in my head, but, I think theta healing helps, because I won't communicate with any being of any kind unless I'm in the theta state, and entities can't enter the theta state without being destroyed, because it's pure light. So I think that helps. I think it's dangerous a little bit to be out in this world of like the new age and like spirituality and not have like a really good training to fall back on. If you're a medium, like, please go get trained to be a medium, so that you know how to protect yourself. And so you have some like support, and you have like a mentor to go to when weird things are happening. So I would say that like is really the most powerful tool I have is just my actual training that I did. But it has been a process of understanding how spirit guides work. And also like there's different levels of spirit guides, you know, like there can be an ancestor in your lineage, like that's a fucking bad person, you know, like you don't want to take that on as a spirit guide. You have to be very discerning and to know that you have the authority to decide who's on your spirit team, and you can fire people from your spirit team. You can fire beings from your spirit team and make adjustments as needed. And as you level up in life and move through different timelines, you're going to have changes to your spirit team naturally. But you know, like an example I always like to give is I had a client who had asked her ancestors for help finding her partner, and then all of the men, I should say, coming through for her, the only men she was seeing anywhere or connecting with were very conservative Catholic men. And it's like, well, of course, because you asked your ancestors to find you a partner, and that's their idea of a partner is a very conservative man who goes to church, who's going to financially support you. And that's not the kind of relationship she was looking for. So I think we have to always be very, very specific when we're working with our spirit guides, and also very aware that not every, you know, spirit that comes through is going to be good, or maybe they are good, but they're just not helpful for you in that moment.
I love the boundaries you have in place with your spirit guides. It's so important, especially because we think of having boundaries with people, and it's very similar with the unseen.
It is true, because I tell my spirit team is not allowed to do or say or manifest physically in a way that would resemble like schizophrenia. I don't want to see beings walking through my house. I don't want voices in my head, because I think it's destabilizing. So if I see a being walk through my house, I know that being's not a friend because they're not listening to my boundaries that I've already set.
Ooh, such a good point. Such a good point. I love that. Been 2 years ago where I had my first experience. I woke up to go to the bathroom and I saw an entity and I almost shit my pants.
Yeah, awful. It doesn't matter how spiritual you are. You don't want to see like a being invading your home without.
No, it's very, especially when you just wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, is this real? What is happening? As a matchmaker, as a spirit guide, what are 3 myths you would say people in the new age realm, the spiritual realm, or people in general, singles in general, believe about love or believe they have to have in order to find love? And then what are 3 of your green flags in dating?
So I think the biggest myth is, I think this might even be unconscious for people, but I think there's this mentality that like, there's people who are lucky and who find love. Like we always say, lucky in love, lucky in love. And there's people who are unlucky and they're just not going to find love. And we kind of treat being single or being in a good relationship or being in a shitty relationship like it's this thing that's passively happening to us. And I think that is a disservice to everyone, because anyone you know who is really like manifested a healthy relationship and does the work to maintain being in a healthy relationship is working really fucking hard for that and worked really fucking hard to manifest that relationship in the first place. And so that kind of like is misleading to people who are single and they think like, oh, I've just been unlucky, I haven't met the right person, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, love is a practice. Love is a skill set. Manifesting love is a skill set. It's something you have to work for. It's something you have to learn. So you sitting around passively waiting to just like one day become lucky in love is going to lead you to being single your whole life. You have to actively choose this path and do the work to get what you want. So I've been saying this for the past few weeks, like whatever you did in 2023 to manifest love or to date or to, things that you didn't do, if you keep using that strategy in 2024, you're going to have the same result as you had in 2023. Like dating takes strategy and manifestation takes a lot of work, and you need both of those things. And then the second myth I think is particular to the spiritual community, which I think a lot of women are thinking like, well, I'm doing the manifestation work, I'm doing the healing work, I'm aligned, blah, blah, blah. Why aren't I meeting my person? 100% of the time that I talk to a spiritual woman who's single and it's not working out for her, I'm just, I say, okay, well, how are you dating? I'm not. Well, why aren't you on dating apps? I don't like them. They're like bad vibes. It's the matrix, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, dating apps are a neutral tool to help you get what you want. Whatever you're seeing through them is what's reflected out of your shadow. So if you're not willing to use dating apps, if you're not willing to work with a matchmaker, you're kind of shit out of luck, because love isn't going to just come knocking on your door just because you're manifesting it. Love isn't going to come knocking on your door just because you think you're aligned with it. You have to go take the aligned action piece of putting yourself out there. Your Uber Eats driver is not going to be your soulmate. So you need to physically put yourself where there are lots and lots of single men. And the best place, the easiest place, like the fastest place to qualify these leads is dating apps. So there's so much resentment towards dating apps in the spiritual community. And it really, I'm sorry, it's a projection of your own shadow, because there are millions of people every day finding successful relationships on dating apps. And then the third myth, I think, is I don't know, there's kind of again, it's similar. There's kind of this mentality of you don't have to show up as your best self on dates. I think it's a double standard that a lot of spiritual women have, because if a guy showed up on a date with them and he was I don't know, talking about his ex, or dressed in a soccer jersey and flip-flops, she would walk away disgusted, oh my God, he didn't put any effort into the date, blah, blah, blah. But then I see lots of spiritual women doing that, not putting any effort or thought into strategically cultivating their dating app profile, or showing up on dates, as they say, I was just being myself. It's no, you were trauma dumping on this random guy. You were talking about your ex. You were violating all of these norms around dating. You didn't make an effort to get ready. I see this so often. And dating is a practice. It's a skill set that you have to get good at. It's just like trying to get a job, if you don't prepare for a job interview and you just show up wearing whatever you were wearing already, and you're not going to make a good impression. And dating is the same. It is a skill set and you have to prepare for it. You have to have strategies with using dating apps. You absolutely should be having professional pictures taken of yourself for dating apps.
I love that one.
Because it's a visual platform. I'm sorry, get over it. It's a visual platform. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know why people are just because it's visual doesn't mean it's bad. It just is. You're telling, stop thinking of it as being judged like a dog show, and think of it as visual storytelling, where you're using your app to tell the story of who you are, and pictures are a part of that. There's nothing wrong with that. And yeah, you just have to work for it. You have to put in the effort. And men, just as much as you can tell when you're on a date with a guy that he's not putting any effort into it, men can tell the same. So a lot of women are going into dating with a bad attitude, thinking they're too good to be there, judging everyone around them, not putting any effort into it. I promise you, men can feel that on you. And that is why you're repelling men.
Wow. Beautifully said. And I love that narrative shift. It's a huge light to bring to awareness that you definitely need to show up as yourself, not this I'm too cool for this kind of attitude on the date. Can you please share with us your big vision for what you do and your purpose and how you're serving?
My purpose is helping divine partners, soulmates, destined partners, whatever you want to call it. I call it soulmates, reunite in this realm. There's been a lot of matrix attacks, obviously, against the idea of being in a relationship, of the idea of there being a relationship that could last lifelong. I think most of our generation is just filled with cynicism about relationships and just assumes it's not really going to happen for them. And that's an intentional matrix attack. Because you're in this kind of soulmate relationship, it's a safe space. It protects you against entity attacks. It stimulates your psychic development. It helps empower your life purpose. And maybe most importantly, the soulmate connection, that energetic bond between two people who are supposed to be together, helps to make it easier for higher dimensional souls to incarnate on our planet. So it's really hard as a really high dimensional soul to incarnate on planet Earth, because it's very dense here. It's very hard to get here. It's really difficult, painful process for them. So when they come when they incarnate in a family where the parents are soulmates, like the vibration of that family is higher and the vibration of both of those parents is higher. So it makes it easier for these high dimensional souls to come to our planet, which I think all of this to say, helps our ascension process. So that is my big mission, for people to know that the deep love they've been craving their whole life isn't wrong. It's not a fairy tale. They don't have to be ashamed because they want a partner. It's part of their soul's mission on this planet in this lifetime. And I'm just here to help people manifest that.
Thank you so much, Isabella. Thank you. That was beautifully said. Hey, if you like this podcast episode, please download it, give us a nice review, and follow us on Instagram at Journey with VRD to get all the latest and the greatest updates. Till next week.